Gu Shijio had managed to escape from Lagua City reasonably easily because the young palace master had to deal with the chaos that she left behind. Guardian Hua had the carriage ready, so they quickly embarked on their secret journey back to the Devil Kingdom. Lagua City was tens of thousands of miles away from the Devil Kingdom. Furthermore, it was safe to assume that Yun Yanli had set up many obstacles along the way, so Gu Shijio had to keep a lookout the entire journey. To keep control over all the cities, Yun Yanli had some of his men traveling from city to city to inform one another about the latest affairs. The men also collected information to disseminate back to their leader. Therefore, Gu Shijio needed to think out of the box to keep her team under the radar. She specifically asked Guardian Hua to get her a carriage that looked similar to what the young palace master's men would use. In the end, they decided to steal one of the wagons that belonged to the young palace master. Gu Shijio had to kill the men to seize the vehicle as a safety precaution. Guardian Hua took the disguise of one of the men that were dead, while Guardian Jin pretended to be the coachman. As a precautionary measure, Gu Shijio took the form of a male attendant. As for Di Fui, he was still a jade statue that sat quietly in the carriage. Along the way, they had encountered several stops but were able to pass the security checks easily due to their perfect disguises. Guardian Hua had all the necessary travel permits with him and knew exactly where the checkpoints would be and when the people would change shifts. Hence, none of the inspections managed to pick up anything suspicious. The entire time, the two guardians were unaware that the jade statue was actually Di Fui. What Gu Shijio told them was that the Devil King had requested for the jade statue to be transported safely back to the Devil Kingdom. It was the most critical task, and failure was not an option. Both men agreed without further questions. To prevent any suspicions from the two guardians, Gu Shijio had requested for them to stay outside the carriage for most of the journey. Guardian Hua hardly spent any time in the wagon and would mostly stay outside with Guardian Jin, who was their coachman. He would only hide in the carriage whenever they were crossing the border checks. Gu Shijio was eager to keep the matter private as she was concerned that any unnecessary disruption would make Di Fui's situation worsen. In fact, she tried not to disturb him either but would occasionally check his pulse to see if his vitals were returning. Unfortunately, she was disappointed every time that she checked. There were spies from the Devil Kingdom in every city in the Shura world. They would send news to Gu Zijia's team from time to time. Guardian Jin would be the first to be notified. He would then pass the message on to Gu Shijio. Even while traveling in the carriage away from Lagua City, she was still able to know what was happening in the city. She knew that Yun Yanli had returned. Upon learning this, she immediately asked Guardian Hua to turn around and race towards the mountainside. It would seem that Gu Shijio did not spend the past year traveling in the outside world for nothing. A year filled with travel was enough to get her familiar with many geographical features of the different places in the Shura world. She learned that there was a very hidden cave in the mountain, so she decided to keep the jade statue in the cave. Guardians Jin and Hua were asked to keep the statue safe in the cave and wait for her instructions. That was the time when Kun Shui called. She immediately left the mountain using her teleportation technique. To be safe, she put a few paper dolls on the back of a few beasts and made them run around. This was merely a way to confuse Yun Yanli if he chose to go after her. She then went to another valley that was not too far away. The valley was rather empty, aside from the numerous boulders that were present. These boulders were fairly large and seemed to have already formed a unique array. She then called Kun Shui and asked him to guide Yun Yanli towards the valley. Gu Shijio was able to predict many things that had happened. However, she was not prepared to see Kun Zui's body shrink this much. When they were finally hidden away in the stone array, Gu Shijio finally had the time to take a proper look at him and was shocked. Gu Shijio asked Kun Shui, "Are you able to return to your original form?" She had no issues against children. However, Kun Shui was still bearing the face of an adult but had the body of a 7 or 8-year-old kid. Additionally, he looked somewhat like a hybrid between a man and a woman. Nonetheless, he was still somewhat cute. Kun Shui was severely injured at that time. It was already a miracle that he was still able to maintain his human figure despite his condition. Upon hearing Gu Zijia's request, he answered hesitantly, "Yes." Instantly, he abandoned his human-like form and turned into an enormous fish. The fish was gold in color but bore the body of a whale and the head of a dolphin. It also had scarlet fins that were gently fluttering in the breeze. Its beautiful double eyelids further emphasized its big, round eyes. Every time it winked, its thick and curled lashes coming together like two pairs of waving fans. The fish supported itself upright with its fins. Like this. It tried hard to look at Gu Zijia's expression. Kun Shui knew that it looked more adorable in this form rather than that of a toddler. In fact, what Gu Shijio meant was for Kun Shui to look like an adult again. Due to its cuteness, she tried hard to suppress her urge to pet the fish. This is your original form? The fish winked at Gu Shijio and responded proudly, well, this is more or less how I look, except for the fact that I am a bit smaller than my actual size. My original size could eclipse a mountain. It was already thousands of times smaller than its actual size. Gu Shijio suddenly recalled a phrase that she read a long time ago. In the north of the underworld, there is a fish, known as the Kuan, with an enormous body that stretches across thousands of miles. There was even an exaggeration for comic effect that went, a small pot is not enough to contain the massive Kuan. It has such great fins that one would need 2 barbecue racks to support the fish. Jokes aside, she never knew that the Kun's original form would be so beautiful. It looked more impressive than any other fish. Gu Shijio was fond of grilled fish and had consumed many types of exotic fish before. However, this fish was not something that she could grill and eat. Kun Shui noticed the unusual look in Gu Zijia's eyes as if she was staring at her food. He quickly retreated. They had not met for long, so he barely knew anything about her. He only knew that she was the woman that Di Fui cared for. Hence, she was a woman that he could not mess with. The woman was also undeniably smart, so smart that he could not help but feel impressed by her quick-witted strategies. Didn't you say that Yun Yanli planned to capture you alive? Why was he fighting you so aggressively this time? Gu Shijio was perplexed by the nature of the battle. The fish was slouching on the ground while listening. Its fins fanned in a casual manner, which made it look relaxed. The trashy man was no longer interested in my beauty. He wanted the pearl inside me. Gu Shijio was speechless. However, she also knew that Yun Yanli was never interested in beauty. While clearing his throat, Kun Shui tried to think of a way to move past his awkward remark. The fish turned around and said with a sneer, it seemed like he has always wanted the Kuan pearl. He seems to know a lot about the nature of my species. Otherwise, the man would not have cast a specialized spell that could prevent any Kuan from shrinking extensively. Gu Shijio agreed with a firm nod. Are there many Kuns in the world? She drew this hypothesis from Kun Zuya's statement. Kun Shui briefly replied, there will not be any mythological beasts like me in the Shuro world where everything is scarce. I am from another world. I had traveled here by accident. A glimpse of hope shone in Gu Zijia's eyes. You traveled here? Does that mean you can actually leave this place? Is there any gate that we can use? She would prefer to take Di Fui out of the Shuro world if there were any way to do so. The two would return someday to fight Yun Yanli when Di Fui was better. Kun Shui was speechless. He coughed awkwardly to buy some time for his response. About that, I did travel here, but I am stuck here for the time being. I cannot leave before the right time comes for me to leave. In fact, he was only here by accident. Otherwise, a proud mythological beast like him would not have wasted years in such a lousy place. He had been trying to escape for years, and during a battle with Di Fui, he had befriended the man and even became his follower. Di Fui had promised to help him leave the Shuro world one day. That was a private agreement between the two parties, so Kun Shui was not ready to share the secret with Gu Shijio. Therefore, he had to give her an equivocal reply. Nonetheless, Gu Shijio was smart enough to figure it out. You have come here by accident and failed to find a way out, haven't you? Kun Shui did not know what to say. The lady had obviously figured it out. In a desperate attempt to keep the discussion from going further, he had to change the topic. A Kuan always harbors bitter resentment towards anyone who has done us wrong and will seek revenge even for the smallest grievance. We are united and will strive to help one another when any of us is in trouble. I will make Yun Yanli pay for what he has done to me. Someday, I will skin him and tear all of his muscles apart. Perhaps, I will even leave his skin to dry so that I can enjoy some bacon. Gu Shijio had mixed feelings as she heard such an eerie remark coming out of the mouth of an utterly adorable fish. After a brief moment, she recalled the clothing that she had in her storage bag, which was made from the skin of a Kuren. She could not remember where the clothing came from, but she knew that she could not let Kuren Shui see it. She took a look at the golden skin on Kuren Zuya's body, then thought about the Kunping skin that she owned in charming blue. Are all of you golden in color? She tried to find out more. Perhaps the dress that she had was not made from the skin of an actual Kuren. The fish shook its head in disapproval. Not necessarily, it largely depends on where we come from. It is just like how humans in different parts of the world have different clans that look somewhat different. However, the golden color skin tone is the most beautiful of all. The skin of a Kuren is a magical protective layer that comes in striking colors. Many great women who had reached the level of a great deity have always wanted to skin us to make beautiful clothes for themselves, but they would usually wind up dead and being skinned instead. Trembling, Gu Shijio decided to push the dress to the deepest part of her storage bag. Are you really so powerful? How can you kill a great deity? She was dubious over the Kun's remarks. Absolutely. Each Kuren is born with an epitome of spiritual power. We can usually achieve the level of a great deity within 1,000 years, Kuren Shui proudly said. Gu Shijio tried to observe the fish and see if she could draw any clues. In that case, are you still a young Kuren? The fish's adorable appearance suddenly made sense. I was already a great deity in the place where I used to be. There is something strange about the Shura world. Ever since I came here, my spiritual power has been depleting tremendously. The mythological beast only had the power of a golden immortal right now, which was certainly not a match for Yun Yanli. I am already an adult, Kuren Shui concluded. I am even eligible for marriage. Gu Shijio could not help but sympathize with the misfortune of the grown-up fish. You are the only Kuren in the Shura world, aren't you? Therefore, you can only marry someone when you are finally out of this place. Kuren Shui shook his fins and said, I do not necessarily have to marry my own species. After all, the same sea cannot contain two Kuns. One careless swipe can easily result in tsunamis. Gu Shijio was astonished by Kuren Zuya's most recent remark. As she silently contemplated, the creature seemed to be ready to say something to Gu Shijio. Feeling that his massive body would make it inconvenient for him to move around, he asked, Miss Gu, may I return to my human form? Of course, a handsome man immediately replaced the adorable fish. The man took a peek outside and remarked, Yun Yanli is not even here yet. They were in the stone array for about half an hour. The mythological beast had roughly calculated Yun Yanli's speed and reckoned that he should be here by now. However, the entire place was still in its usual serenity. Gu Shijio took a look for herself and calmly said, He is already here and has been listening to our conversation for 2 minutes. Kuren Shui said nothing more. Behind a large boulder on the outskirts of the formation, Yun Yanli heard his name being called out. Gu Shijio did not make the formation soundproof, so if anyone paid attention, they could easily hear any discussions even if they were situated outside the formation. Since Gu Shijio was very familiar with this array, she could tell when Yun Yanli had arrived. Yun Yanli wanted to quickly break into the formation at once but stopped to listen to the conversation between Gu Shijio and Kuren Shui. He hid himself using an invisibility spell and tried to get more information first before making a move. In the end, all that he heard were useless pieces of information on how the fish planned to skin him and that the fish was a well-grown Kuren that was looking for a lover. Yun Yanli was prepared to stay hidden a little longer, but Gu Shijio had exposed his presence to Kuren Shui. Kuren Shui teased, It looks like Governor Yun is a coward. He has to hide himself despite his power. Yun Yanli, you are just playing hard to get, aren't you? Are you shy to face me? Or are you too afraid to face us? Yun Yanli was completely annoyed. Apart from retrieving the pearl, he swore to skin Kun Shui and shred his body into pieces. Since they knew that he was here, Yun Yanli no longer had any reason to hide. Kun Yunzhan, I am coming for you. If I fail to skin you, I will change my name. Kun Shui laughed out loud. You can use mine. If you marry me, you can even have my surname as well. Gu Shijiu burst out laughing at that last remark. Yun Yanli was a straight man and preferred to be direct when handling any matters. Gu Shijiu knew him very well. Hence, his encounter with this wayward Kun had been a painful exchange for the proud man. Bewildered, she started wondering if he could be homosexual. Yun Yanli decided to shut his mouth. Any further mockery would drive him crazy. All he wanted was to kill Kun Shui and skip all this useless talk. From the outside, Yun Yanli could not see anything that happened between Gu Shijiu and the mythological beast. He could only hear their voices. He took a look at the stone array and thought that it was merely an ordinary array formation. Being one of the strongest beings in the Shura world, he did not see the need to take any precautions and boldly ventured into the unknown. However, as soon as he stepped past a certain point, everything around him suddenly changed dramatically. All the stones disappeared, and he found himself in a grand palace with glittering articles of gold and glamour everywhere. There was a sea of clouds outside, and a garden with magnificent flowers. Majestically carved pillars with jade inlays scattered the garden. This was his home in the upper bound. Not far from him was Lingxiao Hall. A couple could be seen embracing at the door. They were his parents, the previous celestial emperor and empress. Overwhelmed, Yun Yanli quickly paced towards the couple and kneeled before them. Father, mother, you are both alive. The celestial emperor helped him up. Li Er, Yun Yanli, you may rise. Chapter 2497. Making a fool of each other. Although he was not the crown prince, his parents never treated him differently. When Yun Yanli was severely injured as a result of a catastrophe he experienced, he went into a coma for 10 days and 10 nights. For the whole time, his parents never left his side. He could clearly remember the happy tears they cried the moment his eyes opened. From then on, he made a promise to guard heaven with all that he could, even though he was not the crown prince that would one day succeed his father's kingdom. He tried his best to cultivate and to become a stronger man day by day. Eventually, he became the admiral in heaven who ran the entire fleet of 10,000 divine troops. He had become his father's proudest son and a leader that could not be taken lightly. Never had he thought that one day he would fall and become trapped in the Shura world, a place that was devoid of any vitality. He struggled for a long time but was finally able to leave. However, upon returning to heaven, he realized that everything had changed. Heaven had fallen into the hands of another emperor, and his parents were missing. He never gave up on the search for his parents, for he never believed that they were dead. Nonetheless, he could never find them. The lack of closure and obsession to find his parents slowly consumed him. To his surprise, he was able to see his parents again this time. All of a sudden, he was completely overwhelmed with nostalgia. Warm tears of excitement filled his eyes as soon as he kneeled before them. It was only his introverted nature that had stopped him from giving them a tight hug. When his dad had offered to help him up, everything felt so surreal to Yun Yanli. He wanted to stand but was suddenly perplexed. The celestial emperor's hard, cold hand had forcibly pressed down on him with tremendous pressure. Something did not feel right, and Yun Yanli then realized that he was in an illusion. With that knowledge in mind, he immediately launched his first strike. The celestial emperor was pushed across the air, and a loud crashing sound ensued seconds later. The figure of his father was shattered into tiny pieces after the great collision. Stunned in disbelief, Yun Yanli watched as the grand palace disappeared instantaneously, along with his parents. He was still standing in the midst of the stone array and noticed that a massive stone was shattered into pieces. Yun Yanli's expression turned pale. Helplessly, his furious eyes turned towards the center of the array formation. Gu Shijiu, I have never mistreated you. How could you do this to me? It pained him to have to speak this fact. She had used the array formation to uncover a wound that he had been hiding in the dim recesses of his mind. He would not be surprised if she challenged him in a physical fight, but he certainly had not expected her to use this dirty trick. Gu Shijio was equally surprised by the turn of events. The most powerful thing about the array formation was its ability to uncover one's strongest obsession and use it against them. It invited and trapped its prey by appearing to fulfill their deepest desires. It would usually distract the victim and lock them up in the array. Although Gu Shijio and Kun Shui could not see the exact illusion that he was experiencing, they could still observe his reaction. Gu Shijio had always thought that power was Yun Yanli's biggest obsession. Surprisingly, it turned out that his parents were the ones he truly cared about. A sudden sense of guilt took her over by the sudden realization, and her heart momentarily ached for him. Despite being a clone, she had once experienced the love of being in a family. It did not last long, but the love and warmth that she received from her parents stayed with her. She looked at Kun Shui and saw him casually leaning against a boulder with his chin cupped in his hands. Quietly, he was observing Yun Yanli. He seemed to have caught her curious eyes and answered her without even looking at her. "Stop looking at me. My species is born to be alone. Our parents send us away at birth to run our own course. I do not even know what my parents look like. I also do not know how it feels to be loved by a family. Therefore, I cannot resonate with him." He shook his head and added, "I thought you were his biggest obsession. What a surprise." Gu Shijio looked at him half smilingly and said, "How could you think that I would be his obsession? Perhaps I should ask your master about it when we see him." Chapter 2498, Making a Fool of Each Other, 2, Panicked. Kun Shui quickly got up and apologized. "Please don't. Miss Gu, please excuse my ignorance. I take back my words." Kun Shui was no longer standing in a position of ease. "Miss Gu, how long can you keep him trapped in the array?" Gu Shijio made a guess. "Perhaps a day." Kun Shui was delighted by the response. "Should we take this opportunity to escape? I have to stay behind to support the array. Otherwise, the formation cannot even keep him trapped for an hour." Gu Shijio crushed his hope for an escape. However, what made him curious was why they even wait for Yun Yanli to arrive in the first place. Kun Shui assessed the situation and made a guess. "Did you ask Guardians Jin and Hua to send the Devil King back while we keep Yun Yanli here?" "Yes, we are staying behind to buy them time. It will be enough if we keep Yun Yanli here for a day." "Where are they now?" Kun Shui seemed relieved. Hesitantly, Gu Shijio answered, "They should be at Fengping City by now. We have to do our best and keep Yun Yanli here. As you know, Yun Yanli is the only man who can actually stop them." "Great. We shall keep him here as long as we can." Both of them were communicating privately via their directed audio spells. Under normal circumstances, no one could hear what they said. However, Yun Yanli was not an ordinary man. His spiritual power had surpassed theirs, and overhearing directed audio messages was nothing for him. After a moment of deep, reflective thought, he smiled as he swept his eyes across the array formation. He suspected that as long as he stayed still, the array formation would not do him any harm. It would probably be difficult for him to move further into the center of the array, but exiting the formation should not be a challenge. He laughed out loud as he said, "Shijio, although you have done me wrong, I am still reluctant to make things difficult for you. If you insist on keeping the fish, fine, I shall let both of you go this time." He then turned and started rushing out of the array. However, what he did not expect was that leaving the array formation was just as difficult as coming in. He took one step in the opposite direction and was immediately trapped into another illusion. His parents appeared right before his eyes again. Luckily, he was prepared this time. He smacked his father and was finally able to break free from the illusion. Gu Shijio seemed to have noticed that he had figured out the way to escape the illusions. She quickly tried to distract him. "Yun Yanli, we are right here. Come for us if you dare." Swiftly, she leaped and teleported right in front of Yun Yanli to block his path. Yun Yanli locked his gaze on her face. He seemed to be conflicted for a moment. "Very well then, Gu Shijio. You will have to come with me," he said with a smile. Gu Shijio was not in the mood for a fight. Instead, she took a few steps back and slowly approached the array formation. Yun Yanli was eager to catch her but still could not gather the courage to make any deadly moves. Her spiritual power was no match to his, but her quick wits were nothing short of his tactical moves. She moved around constantly to make things difficult for him. Yun Yanli knew that he had to be ruthless if he really wanted to catch her. All of a sudden, Gu Shijio suddenly tripped and fell into the array formation herself. Yun Yanli smiled evilly. He already knew that she was going to play weak to lure him into the array formation. It seemed that he had already figured out her intention. Pretentiously, he leaped towards the array formation but stopped abruptly before the entrance. Chapter 2499, Making a Fool of Each Other, 3. Gu Shijio, I dare you to come after me. He mocked her. After that, he turned around and disappeared into thin air. Meanwhile, Yun Yanli had actually ordered his men to set up additional checkpoints between Lagua City and the Devil Kingdom. However, he also knew that Di Fui and his escorts were too skilled to be caught. Yun Yanli was sure that they had masked their scents to keep themselves from being tracked. Without his help, his men would never be able to find Di Fui. He had to be there to do it himself. However, he wanted to obtain the Pearl of the Kuan first, but the fish was with Gu Shijio inside the array formation. There was no way he could break through the formation to capture the two of them. And even if he could do it in a day, Gu Shijio would be gone before he even saw them. She would probably set up another array formation for him to delay him again. Hence, going after her was not a wise plan, as it would take him another 3 to 5 days to break free from the endless cycles of cat-and-mouse games. Now that he was aware of Di Fui's whereabouts, the man should be his priority. With Di Fui in his hands, Gu Shijio and Kuan Yunjan would definitely offer themselves before him. Having come to this realization, he chose to leave the place without wasting any time on the various illusions. He had also instructed his men to be vigilant and look out for Di Fui and his subordinates. Since Yun Yanli had left the place, Gu Shijio could finally sit down and heave a sigh of relief. Kuan Shui looked at her and was noticeably worried. Do you think he overheard what we talked about? Gu Shijio answered with a firm nod. Kuan Zuya's face darkened. He must be going after the Devil King. Gu Shijio nodded again. Surely he is. Kuan Shui was even more worried now. We should go and stop him. He wanted to leave, but a sudden jolt kept him grounded. He then spat out a mouthful of blood. The creature's injuries were severe, and now was not the right time for him to enter into another fight. Gu Shijio quickly reassured him, stay calm. They are not in Fengping City. Kuan Shui was speechless. He finally realized her strategy and acknowledged, what you said to me via the directed audios were actually meant for him? How did you know that he was going to eavesdrop on us? Gu Shijio said with a smile, it was a bet. When she was still a mighty immortal, she could hear everything people said using their directed audio spells, so she bet that Yun Yanli could do the same. She was right. Astonished, Kuan Shui was trying to appreciate Gu Zijia's brilliant mind. With a thumb up, he paid her a compliment. You have used the illusion to trick him. What a great strategy. He looked around at the formation and sighed. What a waste for all your effort, though. It would be better if we could keep him grounded for a day. Gu Shijio shook her head in disapproval. Actually, this array formation could only keep him grounded for 4 hours in the best-case scenario. If he decided to crush the array formation by force, it would not even last 2 hours. Kuan Shui did not know what to say. He had to think about the overall situation before he could comment. Miss Gu, you really are the perfect match for the Devil King. Gu Shijio was obviously delighted to hear that. Very well said, we are certainly made for each other. Kuan Shui was speechless, again. He never thought that the lady would be more thick-skinned than him. She was almost as good as Di Fui when it came to shameless self-praise. But one could not deny that the two of them were brilliant at devising detailed plans. Chapter 2500, Making a Fool of Each Other, 4. Yun Yanli was rather unfortunate for having to deal with this quick-witted couple. Kuan Shui truly sympathized a little with Yun Yanli's misfortune. Gu Shijio was looking at Kuan Shui fixedly. She asked, based on your current position, shouldn't you be trapped in an illusion? Do you know how to get yourself out? Qin Shui shook his head and answered proudly, I was born to be an expert in solving array formations. Also, not many array formations can keep a Qin grounded. Thus, he could walk away from the stone formation easily. When did a Qin possess such a hidden talent? With a sigh, Gu Shijiao was relieved that the Qin was on her side and not with Yun Yanli. Otherwise, she would not even stand a chance. Quickly, she studied Qin Zuyu's body carefully. How bad is your injury? Can you fly? I am still fine. I can fly if I try. Are we going to meet up with the Devil King right away? Gu Shijiao examined his pulse and realized that he was suffering from some form of internal injury. She offered him a few pills. Take these pills and meditate for an hour. Your internal injury should be able to heal a little. I will tell you more when you recover. Qin Shui did not go against her wishes. He consumed the pills at once and started meditating. Gu Shijiao decided to follow him and meditated too. She needed to make sure that she was ready for the next battle. An hour later, Qin Shui opened his eyes and noticed that his injury had indeed healed a little. He felt ready to fly. Qin Shui thought that Gu Shijiao would take him to meet with Di Fui right away. Instead, she asked him to take her to Fengping City to have a look. Qin Shui was now wondering if Di Fui was really hiding somewhere in Fengping City. Gu Shijiao noticed his skepticism and explained with a sigh, Yun Yanli is a prudent man, so we should keep the show going to prevent him from getting suspicious. Also, I do have some matters to attend to in Fengping City. Without wasting any time, Qin Shui transformed into a giant bird and soared into the sky. Fengping City was about 5,000 miles away. Even in the form of a bird, Qin Shui would still need 2 hours to get there. As soon as they left, a man emerged from the bushes. The man watched as the giant bird flew away and reported, Master, both of them have just left. From the direction that they traveled, I believe that they are heading towards Fengping City. On the other side of the call, Yun Yanli slowly kept away his directed audio spell as soon as he received the news. Utterly convinced, he began to travel as fast as he could. He did not turn around to catch Gu Shijiao and Qin Shui, for one of them could fly with great speed, and the other could teleport. It would be futile to chase after them. He should focus on Di Fui instead. Yun Yanli thought that Di Fui would be an easy target, so he activated his tracking spell. Upon arriving at Fengping City, his tracking spell had clearly shown no results of Di Fui. Determined, he continued to search every corner of the city painstakingly. Just when he thought that it must have been another one of Gu Zijia's tricks, he suddenly caught a tiny trace of Di Fui's scent. He quickly traced the scent but found a donkey instead. Needless to say, Di Fui must be playing a game with him, too, in order to mislead him. Enraged, Yun Yanli immediately burst into anger. However, his search was not entirely in vain, as he knew that Di Fui could not be too far away. Therefore, he continued searching through the entire place tirelessly. After a long day, he had not found Di Fui but did encounter a tiger, a wolf, an eagle, and a leopard. In fact, he had found many things, except the person he really wanted, Di Fui. All of his attempts had been in vain, and he finally realized that he was fooled again. Based on his past experiences, he would even guess that Di Fui was never in Fengping City. Gu Shijiao and the Qin had tricked him into a frantic search. He took a deep breath and decided that he would not chase Di Fui endlessly. Di Fui would return to the Devil Kingdom, sooner or later, and there was only one way in, which was located at the Black Desert in Suiye City. He would send his troops there to wait for the right opportunity. In the next 8 days, he would secure the entrance with the tightest security. Anyone who wished to enter the Devil Kingdom would be apprehended. Furthermore, the blood rain would fall again in 8 days. Di Fui and Gu Shijiao will definitely need to hide in one of the 9 cities if they are not able to enter the Devil Kingdom in time. Therefore, Yun Yanli immediately contacted all the governors in the different cities to strengthen their security. All members of the troop must travel in a group of 20 and above. Alarms should be sounded at once if something seemed suspicious. All the governors had to take serious precautions to prevent Gu Zijius and her men from attacking any lone troops and then stealing the person's disguise. More sentries were posted to interrogate and examine all passers-by at every junction, whether alone or in groups. At this point, Yun Yanli was willing to kill thousands of his people just to make sure that Gu Shijio and her gang did not slip through his fingers. He had his men scattered in every corner of the Shura world. It was only a matter of time before Di Fui fell into his trap. Everything was well arranged and in place. Yun Yanli had an evil grin on his face as he reflected on the concrete plan he devised. He did not believe that Di Fui and Gu Shijio could escape this time. The first day passed rather quietly. 3 days later, everything still seemed to be the same. 5 days had passed, and nothing happened either. But finally, the 7th day was upon them. Yun Yanli had grown anxious all these days. He was easily agitated, so all of his followers dared not get close to him. Instead, they tried their best to find what he wanted. To their dismay, Di Fui and Gu Shijio seemed to have vanished without a trace. In the very end, Yun Yanli finally thought of the ultimate move to make Gu Shijio surrender herself voluntarily, which was to abuse her people and use them as bait. He had planned to place her people under arrest for creating disorder in the society. However, as soon as the warrant went out, the young palace master immediately came back with a report that all of her people had disappeared 7 days ago. The disappearance happened the day when the so-called celestial being made an appearance. The streets were chaotic that night, so the young palace master and her men busy trying to return the order to the city. She received a report that night that many common people had left the city. Gu Zijius people were among those runaways. As the frantic search for Di Fui had fairly occupied the young palace master, she hardly paid any attention to the missing commoners. After all, she never truly cared about them. However, upon receiving Yun Yanli's order, she sent out her men to find Gu Zijius people, only to realize that they were all gone. Yun Yanli was obviously irritated by the report. He raised his hand and gave the young palace master a resounding slap on the face. "Why didn't you tell me about such a serious matter?" The young palace master kneeled quietly without saying anything. With a sigh, Yun Yanli decided to leave. "Bring your men. Meet me at Qingfeng Mountain, 200 miles east of Luohua City." He finally knew where Di Fui was hiding. They must be hiding in the valley of Qingfeng Mountain. It was where Gu Shijio was trapped before. Gu Shijio was present with the clan leader, who had brought the villagers back to the place where they had once hated so much. That night, Gu Shijio had made direct contact with the clan leader to inform him about her current situation and that Yun Yanli might someday use the people against her. The clan leader was an experienced man, so he immediately knew what to do. The villagers did not possess any great powers but were solidly united. Moreover, they respected the clan leader's every decision. Hence, the clan leader had gathered all of the villagers late at night and seized the chance to run away from the city while everything was in a mess. It was great timing for an escape, as the periodic blood of rain had just passed. After a year of struggling to survive in the city, most of the people had made good progress in their kung fu. Things were easier to handle as a group compared to before, for they were able to retreat and advance together on their journey to Qingfeng Valley. It took them only a night to cover the entire distance. When Yun Yanli finally ordered a complete shutdown in every city, they were already having a rest on the hills, right outside of the valley. At that very moment, Gu Shijio and Kun Shui were dealing with Yun Yanli in the stone array while Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua were transporting Di Fui to Suiye City. Suiye City was located at one end of the Shura world while almost every troop was sent to Fengping City, which was in the completely opposite direction. Most of the security checks only focused on the carriages that traveled from Lugua City towards the Devil Kingdom. They barely paid any attention to the carriages that went in the opposite direction. Therefore, the two escorts were able to pass every security check with ease. As for Gu Shijio, after going around Fengping City to plant a few paper dolls with Di Fuyus sent to misguide Yun Yanli, she quickly raced towards Qingfeng Mountain. While Yun Yanli was still looking for Di Fui, Gu Shijio was already with her people in Qingfeng Valley. A wizardry barrier had been set up to secure the border to prohibit anyone from leaving or entering the valley. Back in the days, it was Di Fui who managed to create a gate in the wizardry barrier by using a specific spell to lead the people out. When Di Fui performed the spell, Gu Shijio was present, so she remembered every step. After reuniting with her people, she tried to perform the same spell again a few times but was not successful. On the last try, she managed to recreate the same gate and guided them into the valley. Everything in the valley remained just the same as they last saw it. Ferocious beasts still rampaged through the forest. However, the people were not who they were before. This time they came back stronger. Fighting the beasts was no longer as difficult as it was before. They wanted to run through the forest on foot, but Kun Shui was not willing to go through the trouble, so he offered to glide through the dangers from above in the form of the golden winged upping while carrying everyone safely on his back. With just a few flaps, he managed to arrive at the cave. The villagers entered the cave one by one. It used to be the place where they were desperately trying to escape. However, it seemed like they had just arrived home again. Although the place was scarce of proper living conditions, they were able to live their lives together in solidarity and friendship, unlike those early days in the city. They had always thought that they were able to lead a good and fulfilling life. However, contrary to their expectations, their life in the city had been a precarious one. They were treated like the scum of society, and nothing in the city was better than what they originally had in the valley. Thus, most of them were happy to be back in the valley. Everyone returned to their huts and started living their lives in the most basic form again. The turquoise, rippling wavelets rolled gently against the shore, with sparkles of light gleaming on the surface of the lake that was as clear as a mirror. There was a white tent next to the lake. Its reflection could be seen in the clear water, creating a rather picturesque scene. Gu Shijio was sitting in front of the tent, with Di Fui's statue next to her. She was caught in a daze while staring at the statue blankly. "Fui, when are you going to wake up? It has been 8 days. Gu Shijio had not anticipated that Di Fui would stay as a statue for so long. Her initial guess was that it would only take him a few hours to return. However, 8 days had passed, and the statue remained unchanged. She started to doubt whether he had really turned into the jade statue after all. Meanwhile, Yun Yanli was still after them. Yet, she was never afraid of him or worried that any of her plans might fail. It was the lifeless statue in front of her that had become her biggest concern. Could the statue remain in its state forever? Was he ever going to wake up? She stayed by his side every day and night. She would even place the statue on her bed even when she was having a rest. She even wrapped her arms tightly around his waist whenever she slept. She would always hope for a miracle. She wanted to see his charming smile again. But every morning she was faced with the same disappointment. The solid, lifeless statue remained just the same. She was not someone who was terribly keen on talking, but every time she was with the statue, she would blabber on about everything they had been through together. Doctors from the modern world would say that the power of words was able to wake coma patients from their prolonged state of unconsciousness. Gu Shijio had been putting this practice into full effect as she talked endlessly with Di Fui even though he never responded. The firmament stone was awake, but it was unsure of Di Fui's condition. It knew that Di Fui used to turn himself into a jade statue before as a way to practice his kung fu, but the condition only lasted for 2 days. Unlike now, where it had clearly been more than 2 days. Had he become too obsessed with his meditation to the point of becoming a lifeless statue? At the thought of the possibility, the firmament stone offered to hook itself onto the wrist of the jade statue to try and examine his body. After all, it was made from the most precious form of jade. Naturally, it was the one that possessed the strongest sensitivity towards the jade statue. Even though it tried to help, the result was the same. There was not a single trace of the man. It tried to absorb the statue's spiritual power, but could hardly sense any trace of spiritual power. The only comforting outcome was that the statue was still warm, even though the temperature was much lower than that of a human body. It was unlike any common jade statues that were usually cold. Gu Shijio sat by the lake and looked at the sun for a moment. She then turned her attention to the statue. With a sigh, She took out the remaining purple cloud mushroom pills and observed them carefully on her palm. The pills were all round and shiny, glistening brightly under the sun. Feeling haunted, her lips tightened into a line as soon as she thought about how Di Fui was turned into a statue as a result of the pills. She had never taken them out of her bag until now. Desperately looking for some explanation, she could not help but pour the pills out of the bottle. If I consumed all of the pills, would I be turned into the same lifeless statue? She seemed to be engrossed by the idea. Master, please do not do anything silly. The firmament stone could read her mind and knew what she was thinking, so it quickly spoke to her. If you consume all of the pills, your body will explode, and you will be shattered to the tiniest bits. There will not be a single trace of you left behind. Do you think that these pills had somehow expired? Gu Shijio asked the firmament stone. Otherwise, why would the pills have such a strong side effect? The firmament stone denied it. No, these pills will never expire. I shall try one, Gu Shijio firmly said. She was eager to regain the power of a mighty immortal. When she was strong enough, Yun Yanli would no longer be a threat to her. She would not have to keep running away from him endlessly, with no place to call home. The firmament stone was not against the idea. Master, it is fine if you consume one pill. However, you will need to meditate in isolation for 3 days upon consumption. Should you ask Kun Shui to guard the place? Before Gu Shijio could say anything, a sudden loud noise distracted her. Gu Shijio listened carefully and realized that the sound was coming from the eastern part of the wizardry barrier. Was Yun Yanli finally here? As soon as she thought of Yun Yanli, the directed audio spell at her waist suddenly flickered in bright lights. She picked up the call and recognized Guardian Jean's voice from another end. Miss Gu, there are some movements outside. Yun Yanli will be here any time now. He must be attacking the exterior of the wizardry barrier. Gu Shijio let out a scornful smile. Yun Yanli had finally thought it out, but it was all too late. With the wizardry barrier in place, there was no way he could make his way into the valley. He could only stay on the outside of the barrier and fight a pointless siege. Within the wizardry barrier, the people could live self-contained lives. Aside from the mediocre food, there was nothing else to complain about. There was an abundant supply of spiritual stones as in Gu Zijia's storage space, so the villagers could continue to practice their kung fu for at least another 5 to 6 years. Ignore him. He will never make it through the barrier, she said nonchalantly. Guardian Jean was unaware of how powerful the wizardry barrier of Toa Tai actually was, so he was still worried. In a determined effort, he decided to guard the perimeters along with Guardian Hua. Their hearts skipped a beat whenever the wizardry barrier moved in a wave-like motion. They knew that Yun Yanli was a man of great power and that he also had many talented men working in his troops. Could this thin wizardry barrier keep him and his men away? Guardian Hua was still troubled about the potential intrusion, so he directed another audio to Gu Shijio. Miss Gu, there seems to be a violent attack from the outside. Would you like to come over and have a look? Without Di Fui, Gu Shijio had automatically become their pillar of hope. If the wizardry barrier was going to collapse, they should prepare themselves for a fight. Although Gu Shijio was not worried about the strength of the wizardry barrier, she still agreed to go with the guardians just to make them feel more at ease. She carried Di Fui's statue into the tent and placed him carefully on the bed. Conveniently, she put the remaining purple cloud mushroom pills in his firm clasp. Fui, I am going out to have a look and will be back in no time. Di Fui did not answer, as usual. She lowered her body and planted a soft kiss on the lips of the statue before teleporting away. With a few quick moves, she was already at the edge of the wizardry barrier and saw the guardians strolling around in a frenzied hurry. The wizardry barrier would sometimes be deformed by the strong external force, resulting in ripples that spread across the entire layer. Also, the barrier was entirely soundproof, so she could not tell how many people were actually present on the outside. They could only see that each attack would often result in a thunderous blow. It was obvious that the people on the outside were determined to fight their way into the barrier and would change different spots to attack. The wizardry barrier, however, was as solid as a great iron armor. They did not damage the barrier at all, no matter how hard he tried. After taking a walk around the barrier, Gu Shijio was even more relieved. She reassured the guardians that everything was good and that they should head back for their practice instead, as there was really nothing to be worried about. However, both of them remained unconvinced. They offered to stay for a day and would only go back to the village when the sky was dark. Gu Shijio could not talk them out of their stubbornness, so she let them be. Once again, she returned to her tent. Di Fuya's statue was still there. Habitually, she started talking with him. Fui, Yun Yanli is here. Right now, he is attacking the wizardry barrier on a violent rampage. When do you think he will be aware of the overwhelming odds against him? She suddenly stopped talking as soon as she turned to face him. Her blank eyes were locked on his hands. The purple cloud mushrooms were gone. His hands were intertwined in a clasping manner, so Gu Shijio was able to place the purple cloud mushrooms on his palm. However, all of them were now gone. Not a single one was left behind. Gu Shijio paced around Di Fui and examined him carefully as she frantically searched for the pills. She somehow hoped that he had awakened, but her heart eventually sank into a hopeless abyss. Over the past few days, she had spent so much time with the statue that she could recognize every fine spot on its figure. She could immediately tell if the statue had moved even the tiniest bit. However, it would appear as though nothing had changed. It was exactly the same as before. Not even a strand of his hair was misplaced. In other words, he was still unconscious. Could the purple cloud mushrooms have been stolen? The white tent was obviously a forbidden place. Everyone here was well aware that no one else was allowed in the tent. Moreover, she had established a wizardry barrier around the tent that was so secure that even guardians Jin and Hua could not enter, let alone the common villagers. Something was not right. Kun Shui was born to be an expert in breaking through wizardry barriers, but at that moment he was resting in the lake that was right in front of the tent. Also, if any intruder were within 3 miles of him, even if the person were the size of a mosquito, he would have been able to sense it. Gu Shijio walked out of the tent and called out for Kun Shui. Soon, a mini version of him emerged. He was quite reluctant to leave the water, so he only showed part of his head on the surface of the lake. Miss Gu, what is the matter? Did you see anyone going into my tent? No, I did not. There has not been anyone around for the past 4 hours. What is wrong? She trusted Kun Shui, but if what he said were true, then where were the pills? Kun Shui was still looking at her with his bright, curious eyes. Have you lost anything? He seemed to have made a smart guess. Gu Shijio nodded briefly and went back into her tent. Kun Shui stayed in the lake and pondered about the severity of the situation. He then decided to go to the shore and transformed into a pocket-sized bird. It would not have made sense if he had transformed into his original size. From outside of the tent, Kun Shui asked, "What have you lost? Do you need my help?" Gu Shijio considered his offer and thought that his good sense of smell could be useful in this situation. "Yes, please come in." Therefore, Kun Shui walked in with his adorably cute figure with short legs. Gu Shijio was pacing around hastily. She seemed to have flipped the bed over to look into every crack and every hole in the tent. The pills were round, so they could have fallen to the ground due to the tremors from the disturbances at the wizardry barrier. Perhaps they had rolled away. She looked up abruptly and saw the pocket-sized bird. "What are you doing?" She was bewildered. The bird took a look at the jade statue and answered calmly, "I am trying to avoid any misunderstanding." The tent should be the place where Gu Shijio and Di Fui spent their nights together, so it was considered as a very private space. If Di Fui found out that another man had been in the tent, he would definitely give Kun Shui a hard time. It would be better for him to go into the tent as a bird instead of a man. At this point, Gu Shijio could not really care if he was a man or a bird. The only thing that concerned her was the pills. Gu Shijio still had 1 purple cloud mushroom pill left, so she took it out and showed it to Kun Shui. She told him that she was looking for this pill and needed his help. Kun Shui knew immediately what the purple cloud mushroom was at first glance. Although he was unsure of the ingredients used to produce the pills, He could tell that it was a great supplement to increase one's spiritual power. No amount of money was worth the rarity of the pill. Losing the pill would be a great loss to anyone. Did you only lose one pill? Where do you think you misplaced it? Chapter 2506. Will it explode? No, I have lost at least a dozen pills. This is one of them. I put them in this tent, and they were still here before I left. However, when I came back, they were all missing. I was gone for less than an hour. Kun Shuei remained silent. Gu Shijio suspected that something had drilled out from the ground and stole it. Therefore, she tried to check the ground to see if there was any hole. Miss Gu, rest assured. If someone entered the tent, I would have picked it up. Kun Zuyu's two wings pointed at each other in front of his chest as if pinching a spell. After a while, many fluffs were flying out from the tip of the wings to all corners of the tent. After a while, these fluffs all flew in the same direction and started hovering over the hand of the jade statue. The tip of the fluffs was all pointing in one direction, the hands of the jade. Kun Shuei remained silent. Did it come alive and take the pills away? Kun Shuei went around the jade a couple of times. He seemed to smell something and finally turned to look at Gu Shijio. The statue has consumed the pills. Gu Zijia's heart jumped. Really? It looks the same though. Kun Shuei looked at the jade statue again. There is no change in its appearance, but maybe it was activated by the pill's aura. Perhaps the jade statue has turned into spiritual jade. Kun Shuei looked like he wanted to break the jade statue and take a look inside it, so Gu Shijio had to keep him away from the jade statue. She suddenly reported that there was some danger at the wizardry barrier and asked him to go there to have a look. Kun Shuei went out of the tent as instructed, and the moment he left, Gu Shijio looked at the hands of the statue and faintly felt that the color of his hands turned slightly red. Well, were the medicines absorbed by you? Gu Zijia's finger touched the hand of the jade statue as she asked. When she made contact with the statue, she was shocked. She could sense a faint spiritual power in the hands of the jade statue. She decided to grab the statue's hands and could now feel that there was powerful energy inside of the statue. When it rushed to her fingers, she subconsciously withdrew her hand and quickly called the firmament stone. Little Tsong, can you check if the statue is full of spiritual power? The firmament stone flew down from her wrist and wrapped itself around the wrist of the jade statue. After a while, it fell off. Master, the power inside it is too strong. I can't stand it. When it was talking, the jade statue seemed to have trembled slightly, and there was a faint light on its body. It looked bizarre. It seemed that there was a flame burning from the inside of the jade statue. Master, will it explode? The firmament stone was stunned and looked at the jade statue, expecting it to explode from having too much spiritual power. Gu Zijia's facial expression changed. If the jade statue were to blow up, he would disappear forever. The fear of losing him certainly made Gu Shijio panicked. She bit her lips and rushed forward to hold the hands of the jade statue. She wanted to absorb some spiritual power from it so that it would not explode. However, she realized that she was not able to absorb anything. It was strange because the last time Di Fui meditated, the firmament stone was able to absorb some spiritual power from him, but this time she could not. She could sense that the statue was full of power, but none of it seemed to be overflowing out of the statue. Chapter 2507. Master, slow down. Furthermore, the surging force generated by the spiritual power inside the statue made it difficult for anyone to even touch it. Gu Shijio found herself being repelled from the statue due to its power. It was as if she were electrocuted every time she touched it. Nonetheless, she did not give up. Regardless of the pain, she touched his hand again to try to absorb some of the power. The result was the same except that Gu Zijia's entire arm was in pain. The firmament quick shouted, Master, no. You can't. Your spiritual power is too low now. You will be hurt. Her trusted comrade estimated the strength of the force that the statue was emitting every time Gu Shijio touched it and realized that it was equivalent to the attack of a golden immortal. Gu Zijio would be seriously injured if she continued. Her eyes were almost red by that point. But if he really disappeared, what was the point of living? At that point, the jade statue seemed to be tremoring at a higher frequency. Parts of the statue seemed to be falling off. Is he? Gu Shijio reached out her hands to catch any falling pieces. Even though some of them were as tiny as rice grains, Gu Zijia's eyes were sharp enough to see that these were the jade fragments of his body. Was he going to disappear forever? It was easy to tell how nervous and devastated Gu Shijio was just by the sound of her voice. The firmament stone was also panicked. It had a bad feeling about the situation but did not dare to say anything. Fui, it is me. Don't resist. It is me. Gu Shijio could not help but rush forward and hug the statue tightly with both of her arms. Di Fui. If you dare to disappear again, I will. I will. What could she do? She could not think of anything that could use to threaten him at that moment. The fear was overwhelming. She did not want to be alone in this world anymore. She ignored the repelling force generated by the statue and smothered it with tears. The tears dripped down and fell on the neck of the jade statue. The jade statue was originally shaking, but after Gu Shijio hugged it, it seemed to have stopped. Even the repelling force seemed to have halted. Was the person in the jade statue finally controlling it? Although the effect seemed to have stopped, Gu Zijia's internal organs were dealt a severe blow from her earlier attempts. Nonetheless, she did not want to let go. She buried her face on its shoulder and said, I am waiting for you to come back. I am waiting for you to come back. You can't leave me again. The firmament stone also flew over and attached itself to Gu Zijia's wrist. It tried to communicate with her, Master, he will not die so easily. Please don't worry too much. This sentence did not have the comforting effect that was intended, as Gu Shijio thought it was only saying those words to try to comfort her. Hence, she ignored it. Since the jade statue no longer trembled, Gu Shijio immediately pressed on both of her palms on it to try to absorb any excess spiritual power from it. Strangely, she managed to absorb some of the power. The surging spiritual power in the jade statue started to flow into Gu Zijia's body. The firmament stone was worried. Master, slow down. It did not draw any spiritual power from Di Fui this time but just remained an onlooker. Absorbing spiritual power from Di Fui was an excruciating exercise, but she still insisted on continuing. Chapter 2508. A smile to show that he finally found a breakthrough. Gu Shijio figured that the more she absorbed the power from his body, the less likely an explosion would occur. All this time, she was so focused on saving Di Fui's life that she did not realize that the sky outside had begun to change. Ominous clouds seemed to have filled the sky. Yun Yanli, who was busy trying to tear down the wizardry barrier, also did not realize the change. He was getting deranged. He had come here with all the best warriors, he had to take them down. It only took a simple statement to convince them, this was a devil's lair, and it must be destroyed. He brought 10,000 soldiers, many of whom were masters at the level of a golden immortal and above. These people had been attacking the wizardry barrier around the valley for 3 to 4 hours now. Budit was as solid as gold. Yun Yanli was also a master of wizardry barriers, and his spiritual power was at the level of a great deity. He thought that there was no wizardry barrier in this world that he could not break and did not expect to be stuck here for so long. Who set up this wizardry barrier? How could it be so powerful? How did Gu Shijio and her people get inside? Gu Shijio had once told him about this wizardry barrier before, though very briefly. She had said that it was complicated to break, and it was Di Fui who managed to find a way through. Yun Yanli had tried to ask more questions, but he failed to get any more information. Little did he know that this wizardry barrier would become a roadblock to stop him from his mission. All of a sudden, fireworks were issued in the distance. Yun Yanli recognized that the young palace master set it off. Apparently, she had met someone, and this was a signal to gather the people. He followed the fireworks and flew over immediately. On a hillside, he saw a green figure surrounded by the young palace master and the rest of his men. There was also a donkey standing with the green figure. It was Mr. Zhu from the Devil World, Gu Zijia's apprentice. Yun Yanli's eyes brightened, and the ends of his lips were curved upwards. It was a smile to show that he finally found a breakthrough. To be honest, Zhu Duking's skills were excellent, especially his ability to open the Rui door, which was superb. It was handy for escaping. He probably came because he heard that Gu Shijio was here. He did not expect to be seen by the young palace master who had a pair of sharp eyes. The young palace master was highly intelligent and knew that Zhu Duqing was good at fleeing. Hence, she went after his donkey instead, who was busy looking for food. The donkey was certainly highly skilled as well. However, the young palace master knew how to tame the creature, so it was quickly shackled by the young palace master using a spiritual rope. Zhu Duqing cared about his donkey a lot, and he would never abandon it. That left him with no choice. When Yun Yanli arrived, he moved so fast that it looked as though he was teleporting. In a matter of seconds, he was right in front of Zhu Duqing with a net in his hand to capture Zhu Duqing. Gu Zijia's apprentice tried to struggle but still could not get rid of the net. Yun Yanli was certainly very happy with his new prized possession. He smiled at him. "Mr. Zhu, how are you? It is good that you could make it." Zhu Duking's handsome face looked outraged. "Yun Yanli, I did not expect you to be such a cruel person." Yun Yanli ignored him and took him to the front of the wizardry barrier. He then shouted, "Mr. Zhu from the devil world is in my hands. Di Fui, quickly ask your people to open the wizardry barrier, or I will kill him here." Chapter 2509. Catastrophe. Using his spiritual power, Yun Yanli was able to project his voice at least a few miles. He believed that anyone in the entire valley could hear it. However, he realized that there was still no movement inside the barrier. Needless to say, the wizardry barrier remained shut. Zhu Duqing sneered. "This wizardry barrier is probably soundproof. No matter how loud you scream, the people inside can't hear it. Even if they did, they wouldn't be threatened by you." Yun Yanli glared at Zhu Duqing. "Do you recognize this wizardry barrier?" "No, I don't recognize it." Yun Yanli sneered. "If you don't recognize it, how do you know that this wizardry barrier is soundproof?" Zhu Duqing kept his mouth shut and said nothing. "Tell me how to break this wizardry barrier." Zhu Duqing rolled his eyes and ignored the man. Yun Yanli smiled. "Mr. Zhu, since you don't know how to bend in a bad situation, I am sorry." Yun Yanli seemed to grip his palms, and the net suddenly tightened. Zhu Duqing felt as though bee stingers had pierced into his body, and his handsome face instantly turned red. He frowned and bit his lips, but still remained silent. "I didn't expect Mr. Zhu to have such a strong body." Yun Yanli sounded cold, and his gaze turned to the donkey as he smiled. His smile was enough to strike fear in the pet. The donkey seemed to have spurted a sneeze as a way of hinting to Yun Yanli not to provoke it. Yun Yanli simply chuckled at it. He then spoke to the young palace master, "Ming Dai, get some ingredients from this donkey." "Okay," answered the young palace master, and she immediately went to the front of the donkey. A serrated knife appeared at her fingertips as she gently stroked the buttocks of the donkey. "My knife can cut the toughest skin. The skin of this donkey is perfect. Let me peel it off to make soup. It must be delicious." The donkey was nervous and slammed its hoof on the ground. However, it could not struggle or move since it was tied up. It turned to look at its owner in the trapped net to ask for help. Zhu Duqing was angry. "If you are not happy with me, just come straight at me. Why would you want to torture a donkey? I advise you to drop this idea. I will not betray my master for this donkey." This donkey could understand the human language, so it was rather disappointed at what its master had said. Zhu Duqing looked at it apologetically but did not utter a word. A soldier who was attacking the wizardry barrier suddenly shouted, "This wizardry barrier seems to have loosened." Yun Yanli was rather excited by what he heard. Zhu Duqing spoke to his donkey, "Don't scream." The donkey shut its mouth and looked at Zhu Duqing with suspicion. Yun Yanli laughed and told the young palace master, "Let's torture this donkey. Make it scream. The louder, the better." The young palace master naturally agreed. Her familiarity with beasts helped her understand the sensitive points of each beast. Hence, she started by stabbing the stomach of the donkey. This donkey was hardly vulnerable, but the way the young palace master stabbed it was rather unique. The knife pierced through its epidermis with ease and penetrated its veins. The donkey trembled and sweated all over. It clenched its teeth but did not scream. The young palace master frowned. Is this donkey a stubborn one? Chapter 25:10, Catastrophe 2. The young palace master proceeded to stab the donkey repeatedly in order to make it squeal. The serrated knife was stained with blood, but the donkey never screamed. It only looked at the young palace master disdainfully. Zhu Duking's face had turned red, and he continued to curse Yun Yanli and his subordinates. Yun Yanli ignored him and continued to order the young palace master. It seems like this donkey doesn't feel pain on its skin. Is it a male donkey? If that is the case, let's take away its penis. The donkey was furious as the young palace master immediately placed her knife near to the donkey's penis. For the first time, the donkey screamed out of fear. Its scream was deafening, and it was very different from that of an ordinary donkey. It sounded like a dragon, and it shocked everyone's ears. The whole valley echoed with its high-pitched shriek. The wizardry barrier suddenly appeared to tremor violently, and Yun Yanli took advantage of the situation by pounding against it with brute force. Along with a loud bang, a big hole emerged in the wizardry barrier. Yun Yanli laughed at his success and asked his forces to make their way through quickly. His subordinates immediately attacked Guardians Jin and Hua, who were patrolling at the edge of the wizardry barrier. They were affected by the tremors at the barrier, and just as they got up, they were surrounded by Yun Yanli and his people. During the fight, Guardian Jin tried to contact Gu Shijio with a directed audio spell in order to warn her. However, at this critical moment, Gu Shijio did not answer her directed audio spell. Suddenly, a flash of lightning appeared in the sky, which lighted up the entire ground. Along with the lightning came a rumbling thunder that reverberated across the sky. Everyone was stunned and subconsciously raised their heads. Their facial expressions changed. There were many red clouds in the sky that appeared to be clumped together. Lightning that was accompanied by thunder could be seen and felt across the entire sky. So, this was the sign of a catastrophe about to happen. But who was going through the catastrophe? Being distracted by the happenings in the air, Yun Yanli did not immediately notice that there was a faint gold shadow that flashed about in the crowd. Guardian Jin, who was initially trapped in the encirclement of the crowd, instantly disappeared. What the hell? The young palace master was furious. This is definitely Gu Zijia's work. However, just when she uttered this point, she recalled that her master loved Gu Shijio. Therefore, she should be careful with what she says. In the past, she was punished by Yun Yanli for cursing Gu Shijio. Yun Yanli said coldly, "It is not her. This is the Kuan. Quickly, chase after him." Gu Shijio did not expect to experience a catastrophe of this sort at this very moment. In a bid to save Di Fui, she desperately absorbed his spiritual power but never expected thunder and lightning to strike above her head. If it were not for her responsiveness to teleport away in time, she and the jade statue would have been smashed. Even so, her tent had collapsed on impact. She immediately knew what was happening. It was her turn to experience a catastrophe. The thunder and lightning were simply a warning to her. Gu Shijio knew that she could not hide from it. Fortunately, she had experienced it before, so it should not be a big problem for her. Gu Zijia's main concern was only for the jade statue. She wanted to make sure that nothing happened to Di Fui. As the catastrophe was for her, she decided to put Di Fui somewhere safe that was not near her. In the distance, a loud crashing sound could be heard. However, it did not seem to be from the catastrophe. Gu Zijia's expression changed as she realized what had happened. Yun Yanli and his men must have broken through the wizardry barrier. It was only a matter of time before he and his men would be here. She did not have time to think about how the wizardry barrier was broken. She had to make sure that Di Fui was safe, so she took the jade statue and plunged into the lake. Upon returning to the shore, the jade statue was gone, and only Gu Shijio was present. She knew that she had to distance herself from the lake, but just as she had come up from the water, a bolt of lightning headed her way and seemed to cover her entire body. It also seemed to have lifted her in midair. Her clansmen, Guardian Jin, Guardian Hua, and Kun Shui, along with Yun Yanli, had already entered the valley. Therefore 1,000 pairs of eyes witnessed the mind-blowing sight. Gu Shijio was being pulled into the sky by an enveloping circle of light as a lightning bolt struck her. Yun Yanli gripped his fingers to prepare to do something. He waved his sleeves to cast a spell but held back. He was certainly familiar with this kind of catastrophe and could easily help in this situation. However, something made him hesitate. With an expressionless face, he ordered his subordinates, "Go in and don't let anyone escape. If you can catch them alive, then let them live. Otherwise, kill them all." Since God had given him this rare good opportunity, he naturally had to grasp it. He should no longer show benevolence to this woman. Thousands of soldiers answered and rushed into the inside of the valley. It was chaotic. Although there were many fierce beasts in the valley, they could not stop these elites that had broken in. The soldiers killed the beasts so easily as though they were chopping vegetables. By chance, they had even killed the king of the beasts. Therefore, the remaining beasts fled in fear as Yun Yanli and his people marched straight into the valley. Although the entrance to the valley was hidden, Yun Yanli was an expert in mechanisms and easily found the way in. Finally, they had made their way into the hidden paradise. Gu Zijia's clan was no match for the masters that Yun Yanli had brought along with him. They were all caught almost instantly. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio was still busy facing a catastrophe in the sky and could not fly down to protect her people. Instead, she found herself seriously injured after being distracted by the need to protect the people that mattered to her. In the end, Kun Shui knew that they had to make a run for it. He only managed to take Guardian Jin with him as he plunged into the lake and disappeared. Unfortunately, Guardian Hua was seized. Gu Shijio experienced 6 lightning strikes and had indeed become an immortal. However, due to obvious worries in her heart, she did not ascend. She merely fell from the sky. Yun Yanli rolled his sleeves up to catch her and hugged her in his arms. He looked at her and smiled. "Shijio, congratulations on your advancement. I am pleased." Gu Shijio was unable to stand at that moment, so naturally, she did not have the strength to push him away. She did not struggle and kept her eyes closed. Weakly, she uttered, "Yun Yanli, I regret." "What do you regret?" "I regret that I used to treat you as a friend. You are not worth it." Yun Yanli's facial expression changed. He was stunned for a moment. After pondering for a moment, he smiled and said gently, "I don't regret it, though. I don't regret knowing you. Shijio, we are a perfect couple. We are destined to be together. Otherwise, how could you fall to the Shuro world so coincidentally? Even you should be able to see that we are fated to be together." Chapter 25:12. Catastrophe, for Gu Shijio sneered. "I believe this is fated. God sent me down here to expose your true face, and to save the people of Shuro world." She could not continue because Yun Yanli had sealed her acupuncture point. The man sighed. "Shijio, although you are an immortal from the upper bound, you seem to have lost your mind after having it brainwashed by the Devil King." Poor thing. Sigh. When he was talking, Yun Yanli's subordinates had scoured the village and turned the entire place inside out. They all came back and reported they could not find Di Fui. Yun Yanli trusted his most loyal subordinates that he brought here with him. They would even miss a mouse, not to mention a human. The only place that they had not searched was the lake in front of them. He muttered, "Is he hiding in the lake?" Gu Shijio closed her eyes and did not react. The young palace master responded immediately, "Let me go down and see." Yun Yanli shook his head. "No, I will do it myself." Di Fui was too cunning. He was afraid that the young palace master would not recognize him if he used some sort of spell to conceal his identity. He had to do it himself. The young palace master stepped forward. "Master, will you hand her over to me?" Yun Yanli shook his head. "No." He looked at Gu Shijio in his arms and smiled. "This lake is good. Let's take a dip." He then brought her straight into the lake. The young palace master was speechless. She was certainly disappointed by what had happened and could only clench her fists under her sleeves. Although Gu Shijio was very seriously injured, she was excellent in the water and had just been promoted to an immortal. This lake naturally could not hurt her. Yun Yanli held her waist the entire time so that she did not have any chance to escape. Due to his power, Yun Yanli was able to walk around at the bottom of the lake. He cast his tracking spell, but it did not pick anything up. It appeared that Di Fui was not hiding at the bottom of the lake. But Di Fui was supposed to be together with Gu Shijio. How could he not be? Yun Yanli was slightly anxious. It was soundproof at the bottom of the lake, so he was naturally not afraid of Gu Shijio screaming down below. He released her acupuncture point and asked, "Where is Di Fui?" Gu Shijio closed her eyes and did not speak. She ignored him. "If you don't tell me, I will punish your clansmen to death one by one until you open your mouth." This time, Gu Shijio finally opened her mouth and said the three cold words, "Up to you." Yun Yanli was stunned. "Don't you care about them?" Gu Shijio sneered. "You should understand that they are not my clansmen. They were only my companions when I was in trouble. How good can our relationship be over such a short period? Do you think it worth me giving in to you?" Yun Yanli remained silent. Gu Shijio continued to speak. "I have done enough in the past 2 years. I don't owe them anything. If you want to kill them, just do it. You don't have to tell me." Yun Yanli looked at her for a long while. "You are not a cold-blooded person. Why do you have to act like you are? Do you think you can fool me?" Gu Shijio bit her lips and did not answer. Yun Yanli smiled. "If you really don't care about them, then I will order my people to kill all of them on the ground after I go to the shore. Anyway, I have told those subordinates that these people are demons from the devil world. No one will even think of keeping them alive." Gu Shijio closed her eyes. "Yun Yanli, I didn't expect you to be so stupid." Yun Yanli remained silent as he gritted his teeth curiously. "Why do you say so?" Chapter 25:13. "You are really infatuated with him," Gu Shijio sneered. "Why don't you think about it? If Di Fui was here and saw me experiencing a catastrophe, he will definitely be protecting me. Why wouldn't he show up?" Yun Yanli snorted. "Maybe he is paralyzed?" Gu Shijio smiled with ridicule. "If this explanation makes you feel more comfortable, you can go ahead and comfort yourself." Yun Yanli remained silent. In fact, he also felt that this reason was far-fetched. The last time he saw Di Fui, the man still looked well. Although he suffered some injuries and his skills were not as good as before, there was no indication that he would be paralyzed. What's more, he had already rested for 7 to 8 days. If anything, he should be stronger than before. So, he is not here? Yun Yanli seemed to understand what was going on. After all, this was the most reasonable explanation. Gu Shijio chuckled but did not speak. "Where is he? Do you think I will tell you?" "Gu Shijio, my patience is limited even for you." Yun Yanli pinched a spell with his fingers, and a spear-like object appeared on at fingertips. "I will count to 3. If you don't tell me his whereabouts, I will immediately order the men on the shore to kill your friends and your clansmen." Gu Shijio remained silent. She pondered the situation, and after a while, she finally said coldly, "In fact, there is no harm for me to tell you. He has already returned to the devil world." "Nonsense. My people have been guarding the entrance to the devil kingdom for days. No one had entered." "Stupid. He naturally knew that you sent people to guard the entrance. Do you think he will just deliver himself to you? We knew that you would use my clansmen to force me out one day and that you would bring your most elite squad. Do you think the soldiers that you left there could stop him?" Yun Yanli clenched his fist. He did bring all his elite troops with him, leaving not more than 8 people at the entrance to the devil kingdom. Those 8 people were certainly able to deal with an average person, but there was no way they could deal with Di Fui. "So, it turns out that you have thought of everything. Deliberately attracting my people here to pave the way for him to return to the devil world." Gu Shijio smiled. "Yes. You are really infatuated with him. Of course, he is my husband. Who else would I be infatuated with?" Yun Yanli smiled slyly. "Gu Shijio, I didn't expect your taste to be so poor. It seems that a child managed to lure you away. Aren't you afraid that the people in the upper bound would make fun of you for it? Gu Shijio slightly closed her eyes and answered indifferently, I am following my heart. I am not concerned over any gossip. Yun Yanli suddenly laughed. Really? That's good then. He then brought her straight to the shore. The young palace master and the rest of his subordinates were waiting for their next instruction. When they saw him returning empty-handed, they knew that he had not found Di Fui, so they did not dare to ask any further questions. Gu Shijio let out a sigh of relief. She had always been rigorous in her work and liked to have a backup plan. Over the past few days, she had set up a wizardry barrier at the bottom of the lake together with Kun Shui. This wizardry barrier was colorless and transparent to anyone looking at it from the outside. The barrier was actually set up for Gu Shijio to hide in if Yun Yanli ever managed to find a way past the wizardry barrier. It would also be a good place to hide Di Fui's statue if anything ever happened. She certainly did not expect to experience a catastrophe at the same time that Yun Yanli broke into the valley. It made her a live target, and she knew that she could not hide. Therefore, before she experienced the catastrophe, she buried the jade statue into the wizardry barrier. Kun Shui went into the lake with Guardian Jean in the middle of the battle. He actually hid inside the wizardry barrier as well. Yun Yanli thought that the two persons had run away, so he did not chase after them. As long as Yun Yanli did not capture Di Fui, there was still hope for a comeback, no matter how badly things turned out. She was worried about his well-being, but she did not show it on her face. In fact, she kept her eyes closed most of the time and just focused on healing her injuries. However, the cries of a donkey made her suddenly open her eyes. She did not see the donkey in the crowd, but she certainly recognized its voice. It was Zhu Duqing's donkey. Did that mean that Yun Yanli had captured Zhu Duqing? When she opened her eyes, Yun Yanli already knew what was going on in her mind. He waved his hand to signal the soldiers to spread out, revealing Zhu Duqing, who was trapped in a net as well as his donkey, which was tied up. The donkey had spent a few days with Gu Shijio before and had grown fond of her. It had treated her as a friend, so seeing her definitely made it hopeful. It kept talking to Gu Shijio as though it was complaining about something. Zhu Duqing was very embarrassed and ordered the donkey, "Don't scream." He apologetically looked at Gu Shijio and said, "Master Shijio, I am sorry." Gu Shijio felt sorry for Zhu Duqing as well. If it were not for her, Mr. Zhu would be safe and sound in the devil world. She had abandoned him for Di Fui, which made her feel guilty about his current predicament. Initially, she thought that even if Yun Yanli caught him, the man would be kind to him. However, she did not expect him to be trapped in the torturous net while his donkey remained tied up. Gu Shijio turned to look at Yun Yanli and then looked away. "Why have you kept him in a net?" Yun Yanli chuckled. "If you promise to marry me, then I will let him go." Gu Shijio was speechless. This guy was sick. Yun Yanli's eyes clearly showed his disappointment. However, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. "He is your precious apprentice. He would sacrifice anything for you. Although he had escaped from me before, he still worried about you and even spied on us. However, he was caught by me. Can you bear to watch him being tortured to death?" Gu Shijio did not speak. Yun Yanli then looked at Zhu Duqing. "Mr. Zhu, see for yourself. It seems that you are not important to her." Yun Yanli was very good at provoking people's relationships. In just a few words, he managed to turn the situation in his favor. However, Zhu Duqing was not a fool. He disdainfully replied, "You are just trying to provoke us. I don't buy it." Yun Yanli's facial expression changed very abruptly. He instructed the young palace master at his side, "Peel off the skin of this donkey." The donkey was raging. It never thought that it would be the one who got the bullet. How did it manage to get in between all these parties? The donkey screamed furiously. The scream was loud as a dragon and shook the stone houses in the distance, causing them to collapse. Even the surface of the lake was moving violently as if someone were boiling it. Everyone covered their ears and stepped back. "Don't scream. Bastard. Don't scream. Do you want to kill the people here?" Zhu Duqing cursed. Chapter 25:15. Let's go down and take a look. Yun Yanli had initially guessed that this donkey's screams were able to destroy the wizardry barrier. Looking at the expression of Zhu Duking's face, he seemed to be more sure of himself that this donkey possessed some unique ability. Yun Yanli suddenly remembered that Kun Shui had jumped into the lake. He turned to look at the surface of the lake and suddenly had an idea. A smile then appeared on his face. Perhaps there is a wizardry barrier in the lake. Gu Zijia's body went slightly stiff. Yun Yanli had nothing to lose, so he instructed, "Let's go down and take a look." He pulled Gu Shijio with him and wanted to jump into the lake again. Boom! A vast waterspout blasted over the lake. A gold figure leaped into the air and turned into a golden-winged bird. When its wings flapped, it rolled up a hurricane that blew the people off their feet. The golden-winged bird flew into the air, intending to escape. However, Yun Yanli's eyes were sharp, and he clearly saw that two people on the back of the golden-winged bird. Due to the large head of the golden-winged bird, the two people on its back were well hidden, making it difficult for anyone to see their faces. Even so, Yun Yanli's eyes were razor-sharp. He laughed merrily. There was indeed a weirdness in the lake. Let's capture them. Finally, he passed Gu Shijio to the young palace master. Look after her. If she runs away, I will peel off your skin myself. The young palace master promised to take care of her. Yun Yanli knew that Gu Shijio was slick enough to escape. Therefore, he sealed a few acupuncture points on Gu Zijia's body to the point where she could not even move her fingers. Then, he personally went to catch Kun Shui. It was a big fight. There were too many adjectives to describe this battle. However, the end of the battle was just as everyone expected. The giant bird was once again held captive by Yun Yanli. Guardian Jean was severely injured during the fight as well. He was originally guarding the jade statue, but when he fell, the jade statue also fell from the air. Gu Shijio watched the jade statue fall from the sky from a few hundred meters in height. Her facial expression suddenly changed, and she wanted to teleport into the air to catch it, but she was now powerless. She could not even scream. Jade was extremely fragile, so the statue would definitely break once it fell to the ground. Gu Shijio was always very careful with the jade statue as she understood how fragile it could be. She did not expect that she would let fall from the sky one day and be unable to protect it. Even an iron statue would be deformed if it fell from such a height. Yun Yanli also saw the jade statue fall. When battling with Kun Shui, he thought that Di Fui was one of the people sitting on the giant bird. Later, he saw that it was a jade statue. He was very disappointed. He thought that Gu Shijio had carved a jade statue of Di Fui because she missed him. Being caught up with Kun Shui and Guardian Jean, he had no interest in the jade statue. Even when he saw it fall, he did not think twice about it. In fact, he would be happy if the statue crashed and shattered into pieces. The place where the jade statue was headed was a training ground. The ground was cold and hard, so no matter how it fell, she was sure that it would break into pieces. However, just when the jade statue almost touched the ground, a layer of white light suddenly surrounded it. Chapter 25:16. This jade statue was really strange. The white light seemed to have counteracted the momentum of the fall and supported it to land on the ground gently, without even a trace of dust. Everyone remained silent. Was this a spiritual jade statue? Or was someone protecting it? The jade statue sat there steadily, like a Buddha. An auspicious light surrounded it. The young palace master suddenly shouted, "This is the god statue that appeared the other day." The people who were present at the valley were the elites that Yun Yanli had brought out from Legua City. Looking at the statue more clearly, they agreed with the young palace master. Yes, this is it. That must be it. Whose jade statue is it? There were differing opinions, but the crowd was getting noisier. Gu Shijio seemed to be on a roller coaster ride today. Although she was less worried now, she was too weak to do anything. Yun Yanli squinted slightly and coldly said, "That is the Devil King Di Fui. As I said, he was the one who created the chaos that day." Everyone remained silent. Although the lie that Yun Yanli created was perfect, Kuinzuya's appearance caused the people to be skeptical. Many people secretly went to other cities to check on the starry arrays, but they could not find any of them yet. In fact, many among the elites here today were still unconvinced by Yun Yanli's alibi. However, seeing this jade statue made them suddenly question themselves for doubting Yun Yanli. The man knew that his reputation had been tainted. Little did he know that the opportunity had arrived for him to clear his name. Master, do you think that the Devil King made this jade statue? Or is this the Devil King himself? Was he originally a spiritual jade? The young palace master curiously asked. Yun Yanli looked at Gu Shijio. Although Gu Shijio was trying to stay calm, her pale face sold her out. She clearly cared a lot about this jade statue. Moreover, this jade statue was really strange. He took Gu Shijio back from the young palace master and released a few of her acupuncture points. He then brought her close to the jade statue and smiled as he said, "It seems like Di Fui had really turned into a jade statue. No wonder that he did not help when you experienced the catastrophe. This is unusual. Could it be that his original body is really made of jade?" Gu Shijio closed her eyes and did not speak. She just let him continue to guess. Yun Yanli walked around the jade statue to observe it. He raised his hand and wanted to touch it. This jade statue is really unique. Gu Zijia's facial expression changed. "Do not touch it with your dirty hands." Yun Yanli squinted and sneered. "What can you do if I want to touch it?" He had never gone against Gu Shijio before. But since she could not get her heart, why should he listen to her? After all, she was now merely his prisoner. Besides, he wanted to slap the statue. He raised his palm and was ready to land that slap. He wanted to slap this person for a long time. Even if he could not hit the real person now, he would be satisfied enough to hit his statue. When his palm was about to hit the face of the jade statue, the jade figure suddenly burst into a circle of colorful light and repelled Yun Yanli's palm. "Poe!" The colorful light seemed to have crashed into Yun Yanli. The man did not manage to slap the statue but instead was shocked by the colorful light. This jade statue had a wizardry barrier around his body. Yun Yanli raised his eyebrows in surprise and chuckled. This jade statue is really strange. Chapter 25:17. Worst case scenario was to start over. Earlier, Yun Yanli was only thinking of slapping the statue without any spiritual power. However, given that he had learned more about the statue, and also that it resembled his enemy, he was now more motivated to land a powerful blow to the figure. This time, he put in about 30% of his power into the attack. "Don't!" Gu Shijio desperately rushed to the jade statue to protect it. Gu Shijio successfully distracted Yun Yanli, who turned his slap into a grab. He picked her up and threw her over to the young palace master. "Look after her." Again, he exercised his spiritual power to land a blow to the statue. However, the result was the same. A colorful light repelled his hand. The counteracting force was stronger than before, which hurt Yun Yanli's hand. Would the colorful light match the force that attacked the statue? Yun Yanli squinted his eyes with evil intention. He now exercised the full capacity of his spiritual power and converged it in his palm. His palm looked as though it was glowing with a wave of power. Being an immortal being herself, Gu Shijio could tell that Yun Yanli yielded the power of a great deity. This kind of force could shatter a diamond into dust. What chance would a jade statue have against it? It would probably turn into powder in less than a second. Although Gu Shijio would risk her life for Di Fui, there was nothing that she could do right now. Running around frantically or screaming would be of no help. Hence, she simply closed her eyes and hoped for the best. If Di Fui were taken down, she would help seek revenge for him if she had to go to hell to do so. She would shred Yun Yanli into pieces and would turn his soul into powder. After that, she would be on the lookout for Di Fui's reincarnation. The worst-case scenario was to start over. Besides, he had reincarnated before. Yun Yanli's fist was headed toward the jade statue. It was so powerful that a gust of strong wind accompanied it. The people nearby had to take a step back. Pang! The earth shook for a few seconds. Everyone clearly covered their ears and even used their spiritual power to help to protect their ears. Nonetheless, the crashing sound kept them in a daze for a few seconds. The villagers who did not have much spiritual power fell to the ground and vomited even though they covered their ears. The blood in Gu Zijia's chest seemed to tremor vigorously. Her vision went dark for a moment, and her heart sank into the abyss. She merely kept her eyes closed the entire time, afraid to see the end result. The loud gasping from the crowd caught her attention, and her eyelashes flickered as she opened her eyes. She was stunned. The jade statue was still sitting there in good condition. It was as if nothing had happened. On the other hand, Yun Yanli was a few feet away from the statue. The repelling force had pushed him into a boulder, which he crushed upon collision. There were dust and fragments of the boulder all over his body. Nevertheless, Yun Yanli still stood firmly. Although he was not injured, his ego was certainly bruised, and his handsome face turned green. Haha. Zhu Duqing laughed. City owner Yun is mighty. You actually flew into the distance from the effect of your own power. Awesome. You looked like a goose that landed on its ass. What a stunning sight. After he was teased by Zhu Duqing, he was even angrier. He raised his palm and wanted to shoot something at Zhu Duqing. Zhu Duqing was sent away rolling on the ground from a vicious attack. However, he was a stubborn man and refused to stand down. He swiftly spat out a mouthful of blood before laughing scornfully. That was great. Are you trying to prove yourself by defeating me? Yun Yanli certainly did not appreciate his mockery, so he hit him another time. Yun Yanli had gotten almost everything that he wanted from this trip. However, the strangeness of it all left him with a weird feeling. Many of his men were curious about the jade statue and started to guess what material it could be made from that made it so indestructible. It managed to embarrass the almighty Governor Yun so publicly. Moreover, could the statue be the Devil King? Was he the one who had brought a series of doom and gloom to the Shuro world? Could a statue really be so powerful? And, if the Devil King had always been so powerful, he should have conquered all of the cities a long time ago, right? Why would he stay hidden in the Devil Kingdom for so long? Some people were well aware that the Devil King had mastered some degree of kung fu that was certainly admirable. But they also heard that it was nothing above that of a golden immortal. Logically speaking, the Devil King would still be defeated by Yun Yanli if they were to battle one another. Therefore, how could the Devil King statue cause so much resistance to Yun Yanli when he was obviously not a match for him? Perhaps, the statue did not belong to the Devil King but belonged to God. The crowd started to make some speculations, but no one had not found the courage to voice out their thoughts. They only stared at each other blankly, waiting for some direction. Yun Yanli could tell that some of his men were starting to have some doubts about what he had said before. He looked down and put a tight smile on his face. "Burn this place. Let's go back," he said nonchalantly. A wildfire engulfed the entire place almost instantaneously, and the villagers could be seen sobbing. For the past week, they had been leading a very peaceful and secure life back in the valley. Then, a fire came and took their homes away. They knew that they could always rebuild their homes, but how could they restore the wizardry barrier that could shelter them from the corrosive blood rain? Even if they survived this calamity, they could only live in the city from now on. They would have to be the scum of society again. They turned to Gu Shijio and caught her staring at the fire as well. Even in such a difficult situation, she did not look very depressed. From her eyes, they could clearly see the courage that she possessed. Her presence alone had become a pillar of hope for the people. Everything was possible if they made it possible. Moreover, Di Fuya's statue possessed such an incredible source of power, which also proved that he was not only alive but was also growing stronger. As long as he was alive, they could be hopeful. He will surely wake up, they thought. And he would come back stronger than before. It was often said that a man's mistress should be kept in a splendid abode. Emperor Wu Di of the Han dynasty used to be fond of his cousin, Chen Ajiao, so he made her a promise that if they were to get married someday, He would build her a splendid house decorated richly in dazzling gold to show her how much he actually adored and cared for her. When they finally got married, he did as promised and made her a very beautiful house in majestic splendor. For a while, she was the only one who had all of his attention. However, things changed when he had a change of heart and fell for someone else. She was deposed and stripped of her title as his queen. She ended up spending her entire life being imprisoned in the palace, never to see the emperor again. Gu Shijio knew the origin of the legend. What she did not know was that one day, she would end up staying in a majestic house, or more accurately, be imprisoned most fancily. The interior of the building was magnificent and luxurious. From the walls to the ceiling, every inch was plated with gold. Even the sandalwood furniture was all finished with gold linings. The bed in the middle of the room was also made of gold, covered in curtains that were woven from golden silk. Surprisingly, the toilet bowl in the corner was even made of gold too. Her eyes were dazzled by the amount of gold and yellow charm in the room. It had been 3 days since the start of her captivity. About 7 or 8 acupuncture points on her body had been sealed to make sure she had no strength to even stand up properly. A casual walk around the room would drench her in an extensive amount of sweat. The structure of the room was a little odd, though. Instead of a square, it was actually the shape of an octagon. Instead of calling it a house, some might prefer to refer to it as an array formation. Anyone who had been following this incident would know the main purpose of this formation, which was to prevent Gu Shijio from teleporting. Therefore, Gu Shijio was trapped in the place. To minimize any chance for an escape, Yun Yanli did not even send any servants to help her. He must have been concerned that the female servants would end up being manipulated and used by Gu Shijio. For the past 3 days, Gu Shijio had not seen a single person. Furthermore, the golden house was also soundproof, so she could not even tell what was actually going on. She was the only one in the confined space, with nothing but silence in the air. Her breathing had become the only sound in the room. There was not even a window. The place was solely a box on its own. There was only a door for outsiders to come in, but it was constantly sealed, so there was no way she could open it. The place was so quiet that it would drive anyone crazy if they stayed there for too long. Normally, people would do all sorts of things just to feel that they were not alone. For example, they would talk to themselves or even sing out loud just to fill the void. However, Gu Shijio did the opposite. She never even spoke a word. After realizing that she had no way out, she stopped wasting her energy. Instead, she focused her attention only on meditating. Even though she could not properly use the spiritual energy that was sealed within her body, she still continued to meditate for a few hours at a time. Slowly, she would take a walk in the house before sitting down for another round of meditation. "Shijio, are you used to your life in here yet?" The golden door was suddenly open, 3 days later. Yun Yanli could be seen walking towards her with a big smile on his face. Gu Shijio did not answer him at all and continued to sit very still. This action made Yun Yanli slightly irritated. Although he did not visit her in the past 3 days, he was able to see everything that happened in the dwelling. He had thought that Gu Shijio would be very grumpy for being held captive, but she remained disciplined, like an ascetic monk with a tough will. He took a walk around the place and said with a smile, "Shijio, you have once told me about a young wife who lived in a plush house. I made a promise to myself back then that I would build you a golden house someday. Now I have kept my word. How do you feel about this golden house? Do you like it?" Scornfully, Gu Shijio gave him a tight smile without saying anything. How did she actually feel? She felt that Yun Yanli was nothing but a cynical parvenu, a man with nothing else but money. When she was traveling with Yun Yanli in the upper bound in search of a mighty immortal, the journey was rather boring. Knowing how much the muscle liked to hear stories, she casually told it about the young wife with a plush house. Yun Yanli, who was just beside her, heard everything. Never had she expected that one day he would build her the same confinement in gold. Nonetheless, a normal house that was made of gold would not be able to stop her from teleporting. Hence, Yun Yanli must have cast some spell over this place to block her from teleporting. Yun Yanli tried to initiate some small talk with her, but she did not respond. It was as if he were dead to her. Annoyed, Yun Yanli decided to talk about something that she might be interested in. Do you want to know what I have done to the jade statue? Gu Shijio finally answered, but with mockery, did you get thrown away again? Yun Yanli was speechless. He acknowledged her with a sneer. It is only a jade statue. Do you really think I cannot do anything to it? I have only been sparing it because of you. In fact, he had tried many ways to shatter the jade statue over the past 3 days, using heavy objects and even fire. He had thrown it hard against the floor, too, and even blasted it with his spiritual power. Nonetheless, the jade statue remained intact without even a scratch. The powerful 7-colored wizardry barrier around the statue was able to resist all the external forces he used. He was quite bothered about it. He only brought it up to get Gu Zijia's attention, but she decided to uncover his lies right away. You are not sparing it. The fact is that you can't do anything to it. Don't make yourself sound so great. Chapter 25:20. What could be the person's intention? After a short pause, he suddenly let out a laugh. Do you really think I can't do anything to it? He said it in a calm tone, but his intention was clearly evil. Gu Shijio teased him, so what if you can hurt it? You are only torturing the statue because you cannot find the man himself. Does that make you look any better? The statue is Di Fui. Yun Yanli exclaimed confidently while locking his gaze on her. Gu Shijio closed her eyes to avoid him. Yes, the statue is the man. You should keep on trying to attack it. Yun Yanli could not get any hint from her expression, so he paused for a while. Shijio, I have good news for you. Would you like to hear it? He suddenly laughed out loud. Gu Shijio did not even look at him. All of his news would be bad to her, no matter how good he made it sound. At this point, nothing could be worse than what she was experiencing at the moment. Hence, she did not quite care. Yun Yanli took a chair over and sat down next to her. He then took a look around the place. Then, all of a sudden, he started talking about the most random topic. Shijio, there is something I have not told you. Before we met, I once had a dream. In the dream, someone told me that I was destined to meet a woman from Earth. The person in the dream told me that I would risk anything for her and even descend to Earth as a result of a catastrophe. I was too arrogant to believe anything from the dream, and I didn't care about it either. Things changed when I met you. Unknowingly, I fell for you. I would spend all of my time with you in pursuit of the man you were looking for. It pained me every time you returned to Earth because I would have to wait for another 6 months before seeing you again. I knew that you were obsessed with another man, so I did not confess and only kept my feelings to myself. I thought that one day you would finally notice me because it was impossible to find a man who was already dead. Your kung fu was so much more powerful than mine, so I tried very hard to practice and make myself a better man. Suddenly, one careless move during a war sent me all the way down to the Shura world. I got depressed, so I got myself drunk every day until Yun Qingluo showed up. She told me that I would be the ruler of the Shura world. There was only one way I could leave this place, which was to become a mighty immortal, and the only way to become a mighty immortal within a century was to use these starry arrays. She was not interested in his confession at first, but could not shut her ears, so she listened on. Somehow, she could tell that there was actually a bigger and more evil plan behind it. She suddenly thought about the mysterious voice that would appear in her head sometimes. For a while, she had thought that it was a voice from some guardian of the heavenly law. She could not help but wonder if the voice actually belonged to the same person who appeared in Yun Yanli's dream. If what Yun Yanli said was true, the person would be the mastermind behind the starry array. Perhaps, the person had first taught it to Yun Qingluo, so that she could guide Yun Yanli through. What could be the person's intention in helping Yun Yanli's progress to become a mighty immortal? Gu Shijio was sure that the person was not doing it for a good cause, as he or she decided to be shrouded in mystery. What could be the benefit of helping Yun Yanli grow? Throughout her contemplations, Yun Yanli never stopped talking. He continued to talk about how painful it was during his practice and that when he finally returned to the upper bound, his family was already broken up and decimated. He even told her that he could now travel between heaven and the Shuro world at will. He continued to tell Gu Shijio how happy he was to have met her in the Shuro world. Chapter 25-21. Her honest words speared into his heart. Gu Shijio thought that she might be able to get some information from him, so she started paying attention. However, she ended up disappointed as he only talked about how much he adored her. Not wanting to waste an opportunity, she tried to ask, "Has the person in your dream told you anything more?" After babbling on for so long, Yun Yanli was relieved that he could finally get her talking. He fixed his eyes on her attentively and tried to engage her into a conversation. "I have never seen that person's face. I could only hear the voice of the person in my head. Later on, the person told me that I was in control of my destiny. If I worked hard enough, I would surely get what I wanted. All that I have ever wanted is you, Shijio." Gu Shijio ignored his confession and only focused on what she was interested in. "Haven't you asked Yun Qingluo more about the starry arrays that are obviously evil?" Yun Yanli suddenly took her hand and smiled. "Of course I have. What do you want to know?" She was irritated by his physical gesture and stupid question. If she did not want to know more, why would she even bother to ask? Gu Shijio wanted to take her hand back, but was too weak to resist him, so she sat quietly. Marry me and become my wife. I shall tell you everything that you want to know." Bewildered, Gu Shijio turned speechless. "Yun Yanli, you should know that I do not love you. We were once friends. After all that you have done, I don't think we can even be friends now. Why should you force me to do something against my will? I am not afraid to tell you that Di Fui and I are already married. You and I are not destined to be together. The voice in your dream must be bluffing you by making you think that I am the one. You must be a tool for something bigger in his or her plan. Listen to me. You should stop holding on to false beliefs. I have merely become an obsession to you and nothing more." Gu Shijio said it casually, but her honest words speared into his heart. After a pause, Yun Yanli suddenly broke into laughter. "I see. What I have for you is only an obsession. I do not care if it is an obsession or love. So many years have gone by and the only thing I look forward to is our reunion. Reluctant or not, you are marrying me. I do not care if you and Di Fui have really become husband and wife. I will still marry you and end his life. I have checked the dates. The day after tomorrow will be a good day. I shall go now and prepare us a very glamorous wedding." Before Gu Shijio could say anything, he added a scornful remark. "There is no need for you to resist. I am not doing this for your sake, but mine. You can only wait until you finally become my bride. I will prepare a grand wedding and a big show for you to enjoy." He raised her chin and continued, "Little Shijio, you will surely be very surprised. I have invited all of the villagers and your friends to attend the wedding. Even though you have mistreated me, I am still giving you the best of everything." Delighted, he let out another laugh before leaving. The man had gone mad, and Gu Shijio was just relieved that he left. Yun Yanli had completely disregarded their friendship in the past. This time, he was going to force her hand to get what he wanted. Clearly, he was doing all Thisto try to bait Di Fui out of the Devil Kingdom. Gu Shijio tried to think hard for a way out of this mess. No amount of crying or tantrums could save her from despair. She could only keep calm and think. She tried to think of any clues based on his appearance and realized that the man still carried a faint evil aura around him, which meant that he had not taken the Kuan Pearl. In other words, Kuan Shui was still alive. Given that, she suspected that Guardians Jin and Hua must be alive, too. They were most probably imprisoned. As for Zhu Duqing, she had a feeling that she needed to be careful of that man. Since there was no way she could escape, she continued to meditate. Although she could not access her spiritual power, her physical strength had completely recovered from the catastrophe. All she needed was a chance to make a move. The luminous Milky Way glimmered brightly in the night sky. Specks of light formed into bright and colorful constellations. There seemed to be a canoe that was afloat along the Milky Way. The canoe was as blue as the clear sky, decorated with drawings of a stellar map. The starry night sky and the stellar map added radiance and beauty to each other, forming a dazzling picture. A man in charming purple robes was sitting on the canoe. On his head, there was a hairband, embellished with a glistening gem in the shape of a fox's eye. Gu Shijio held her breath in disbelief. The man was clearly Di Fui. Was he awake? How did he come here? For a second, she forgot where she actually was and rushed towards him. Di Fui. With the help of her teleportation, she was traveling very quickly. However, no matter how fast she tried to get close to the man, the distance between them never seemed to reduce. It was as if she was running at the same spot. The man was still leaning casually on his canoe, with a fishing rod in one hand and his chin on the other. He was there, fishing on his own. Abruptly, she stopped running and looked carefully at the man. Something was not quite right. The man did not seem quite like Di Fui. Firstly, Di Fui did not possess such a powerful aura as the man did. This man also seemed carefree, seemingly aloof from all worldly affairs. His aura, however, was immensely powerful, as if the fate of all cosmic inventories was under his sole control. The sun, the moon, and the myriad of stars were mere specks of dust that moved according to his command. She stood gazing at him for a while and was quickly intimidated, so much so that she wanted to fall on her knees and bow to his mighty power. Who was this man? How could they look so much alike? In a daze, she started to make sense of the current situation. Was she dreaming? She took another look at the myriad of stars, and everything seemed familiar to her. Then, a sudden realization hit her. Could the man be the master of heavenly law? She had the same dream before, where the man was sitting within a cluster of stars. He was arranging the cosmic matters when she saw him. However, this man was fishing. In her earlier illusion, the man was not wearing any mask, but Gu Shijio could never get close enough to see his face. She could finally have a clear look at him this time. From the way he dressed, every detail of the garment reminded her of someone she met before. She could not help but reminisce about her past. She specifically thought about a man who once had a very profound relationship with her, a man who had undoubtedly left a very long-lasting impression on her mind. She had an urge to call him Celestial Master Zua but hesitated. Do you prefer to be addressed as Celestial Master Zua Huang Tu, who used to be the Lord from the Earth, or Prince Ninmadi Fui, who is now the Devil King? She was surprised by the sudden voice. She looked towards the source of the voice and saw a toddler standing in the distance. He seemed very young, probably about 2 years old. He was staring at her with his big, watery eyes. The tone of his pink lips completely resonated with the faint blush on his chubby cheeks. He was wearing a small set of silver robes that looked like an exquisite work of art. Gu Shijio called him out loudly in astonishment. How air! The toddler was not a stranger. He was the child that she found in the wilderness, the one who acknowledged her so eagerly as his mother. Chapter 25-23. The Master of the Heavenly Law. She recalled how small he used to be when they first parted in the Devil Kingdom. He was only a few months old. Shortly after, he had grown up so quickly. How air! Gu Shijio lowered her body to give him a hug. Di Hao waved his hands and clung onto her sleeves. Mother, he said while pulling her clothes. Gu Shijio decided to squat and gently caressed his hair. It has only been a few days. Look at how big you are. What kind of magic pill have you swallowed? Di Hao was quite embarrassed. I did not take any pills. I have got this all from my parents, he humbly explained. Gu Shijio was speechless. Impressive genetics, she thought. It was very similar to Di Fui. Who are your parents? Gu Shijio was eager to find out. Di Hao looked at her with teary eyes as he said, Mother, don't you want me anymore? Gu Shijio said nothing more, for she knew there was nothing she could get from him. She continued to observe the boy. He somewhat reminded her of Shen Yanma when he was little. Could the child be the son that Di Fui never knew he had? However, she was also sure that Di Fui would never lie to her. He would never get into another relationship with another woman. If he really had a son, she would definitely be the mother. The conflicting part was that she knew she had never given birth to any child. Nonetheless, some parts of her memory were lost. Everything about Huang Tu had been completely forgotten. She was quite sure that she had been married to Huang Tu, but after everything about him vanished, she mysteriously became a virgin again. Could he be the child she and Huang Tu once shared? Shouldn't your surname be Huang? Gu Shijiao immediately asked. No, my family name has always been and always will be Di, the child was absolutely sure. Gu Shijiao was a little lost. Di Hao looked at her with big eyes and was somewhat delighted by her cluelessness. Mother, stop trying to figure out my past. You will never get it right. You should just answer me. Gu Shijiao raised her eyebrow at him. What should I answer you? Celestial Masters Wu, Huang Tu, Shenyan Ma, and Di Fui are all the same man. No, something about them is different. Think about it. If the woman he liked was your previous life, would you be comfortable with that? What about her previous life? Who was she in her last life? Gu Shijiao had never thought about it, so she did not know what to answer at first. Would she be comfortable with the fact that he was only nice to her because of their past? Gu Shijiao thought about it and realized that she could not grasp the concept at all. She was a very realistic woman and was never eager to find out about what could have been. However, the child seemed rather serious about finding out her thoughts. Therefore, she felt the need to answer him. She continued to rub the boy's head and said, My sweet child, you are too young to understand the things that only happen between adults. You should keep the complicated thought until the day you become a grown-up. However, I can be sure that if he liked me, I would not mind if the one he truly fell for was the woman in my previous or later life. After all, there is only one soul in different physical bodies. I do not care much about the physical stuff, and it is unnecessary to compete against myself. Her answer seemed profound, so Di Hao took some time to absorb it. All of a sudden, he smiled delightfully. My mother is truly an insightful woman. I get it now. Chapter 25-24, The Master of the Heavenly Law, 2. He raised his hand to put Gu Zijia's messy hair back in place. From the way he acted, she could tell how casually he treated her. Suddenly, Gu Shijiao had a thought that the boy was actually an adult who resided in the body of a toddler. The sudden thought sparked an idea in her head, so she asked him directly, Di Hao, did you come from the future? Distracted, Di Hao stopped messing with her hair and gazed at Gu Shijiao intensely. He was impressed by her precise assumption. It was rumored that a pregnant woman would lose the ability to think straight for at least 3 years after giving birth. Obviously, the same saying did not apply to his mother. His eyes lingered on Gu Zijia's stomach for a while before looking away. You can assume so. There were things that he was not allowed to share. Once he did, he would immediately vanish. Moreover, he had an unaccomplished mission to attend to. He turned his eyes towards the man in the stars and smiled. There he is. What was the boy talking about? Gu Shijiao followed his gaze and was surprised by what she saw. The master of the heavenly law, who highly resembled Di Fui, was still sitting in his canoe. However, there was another man in black who suddenly appeared and greeted him politely with a boy, My Star Lord. The man in black was obscured in a cloud of mist, so Gu Shijiao could not get a clear view of his face. She only had a feeling that the man was somewhat similar to the master of the heavenly law. Black was the coldest color of all. So, for a man who dressed entirely in black, he would either be very cool or very serious. She looked at the man in front of her and found him to be quite elegant and graceful. Furthermore, his aura was equally powerful and intimidating as the master of the heavenly law. From what she observed, the man did not look like a follower, but more like a friend. Otherwise, he would have greeted the master of the heavenly law with a bow. The master of heavenly law was still seated, casually lifting his chin with one hand. Let us have a round, shall we? Better to accept the offer than to refuse it politely, the man in black swiftly agreed. The master of the heavenly law waved his sleeves, and a chess set immediately appeared between them. On the board, all they had were a series of stars as opposed to black and white pieces. The men took their seats and started playing. Gu Shijio knew how to play chess, but the way they played it was too complicated for her to understand. Their chess was nothing close to anything she was familiar with. Each of them had hundreds of star pieces, placed in a jumbled manner. Between the stars, there were many similarities, but each with different colors and brightness. A crisscross network of stars made it rather confusing for her to tell which pieces actually belonged to whom properly. Both of the men were, nonetheless, very familiar with their pieces. The way they played the game was swift and accurate. It was obvious that they played the game quite often. At first, Gu Shijio was quite dazzled by the number of stars on the board, as she could hardly differentiate them. However, her impressive memory helped her memorize the sequence of their moves. There were about 2,000 pieces, but she never let any of the moves slip. When she could finally differentiate their pieces, she started to know who was actually on the winning side. It looked like the master of the heavenly law was leading the game. The boy next to her was looking at the game attentively. After a while, he started to explain the rules to her. "Mother, you cannot recognize the pieces, can you? They are different from normal chess pieces. The game is actually known as the Starry Law chess. The composition is all about the law of the stars." The boy was certainly knowledgeable. Gu Shijio threw another quick look at him and said, "You seem to know many things. Where did you learn all of that?" She tried to get more information from him. However, the boy was able to keep the secret to himself by answering her briefly, "From my family." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.